What is up, everybody? Welcome back here to the Debbie Route YouTube channel. Me and Christian are back with, we love this video, so you better like it too, because we like doing these and we want to see the views go up on these. We're back with a Dynasty Startup. Would you rather? Would you rather have Jalen Hurts or CJ Stroud in a startup? And I think one of the things that we're looking at here is that ADP, right? And where we have them ranked. So when you're thinking of our ranks right now, we do have consensus QB3 for CJ Stroud and consensus for Jalen Hurts at QB4. Now, in terms of this, in these leagues for league settings, because I think it does matter for both of these guys, we are looking at 12-team Superflex, but it is 6-point passing touchdown and 6-point rushing touchdown, which I think evens them out. I think that if it's 4-point passing touchdown, I think Hurts gets the nod just because of that Konami code ability. So for this video, 6-point passing, 6-point rushing, that's what we're leaning into. And that is where their ADP is right now, though. In Superflex startups, you are looking and you are determined, do you want CJ Stroud or do you want Jalen Hurts at 103 or 104? And if you're sitting there at 103, you have to make that decision. Now, earlier in the year, it was Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was pretty much consensus 103 for the last couple years. Actually, we've seen that because of his rushing upside. And this year, even at the beginning of the year, January and February, I did see Jalen Hurts going to 103. It has shifted since then because of everything they've done in that offense and everything they've kind of looked at and added around CJ Stroud and the season that he had. But I think it is a tough call because I think from a rushing standpoint and a projection standpoint, Jalen Hurts probably will finish ahead of CJ Stroud. Maybe. We'll get into it. We're going to decide how we feel about that. But talk to us about CJ Stroud's season last year.
Yeah, I mean, historically good rookie season from CJ Stroud. He everything that he did in that last Georgia game that he played, he just showed at the NFL level immediately. Supremely accurate kid, over 4,000 yards, 4,100, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He was very, very good at taking care of the football. So while you didn't have a ton of rushing upside with CJ Stroud, when you compare him to Jalen Hurts, the lack of turnovers was something that really kept his floor, his fantasy football floor, pretty high. From a scouting perspective, just supreme accuracy. Like I said, when you look at what he is now throwing to, and how he's going to be in that second year of mastering an offense, rookie quarterbacks shouldn't do what CJ Stroud did last year, for what it's worth. That is potentially the floor of CJ Stroud. So we could be looking at, it's a little bold, but like you could be looking at a Patrick Mahomes MVP like season where you're pushing 5,000 yards, you're pushing, 40 touchdowns, maybe a little bit more because of what they've put around him. You've got Stephon Diggs there now. You're going to have a healthier Tank Dell, hopefully. You're going to have Nico Collins as well, who is being paid like the wide receiver one there. And so when you look at what this offense can be, it could be you added Joe Mixon as a much better option than what Dameon Pierce was last year. To Dameon Pierce, who I think can still be a bit of a factor in this offense, but you look at everything around him, and it's very difficult to see CJ Stroud getting worse or not succeeding in this offense. From a fantasy football perspective, though, there's a reason we're debating this, because while CJ Stroud can be the best NFL quarterback without that rushing floor, it is a little bit different. You could look at Jalen Hurts getting 10 less touchdowns through the air, but 8 more on the ground. And so that's why it's such a debate here. But overall, Stroud, great player. Very, very excited to see him in year 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not saying he's bad. I hope everybody knows that. We're talking about a very, very solid player. Bobby Slowick being there this year, but we've talked about this before when we used to have a Dynasty show eras ago. When the offensive coordinator, leaves, and especially when that head coach is a defensive-minded guy, I think one thing to note next year is Bobby Slowick's probably getting another job somewhere, and that offensive system is going to change. So from a dynasty perspective, I think that's something to know. I think Stroud can obviously overcome it, and they're going to do a good job. They probably will promote from within. But Jalen Hurts, I know Kellen Moore is there now, and I'm not a big Kellen Moore fan, and we'll probably get into that. But Jalen Hurts, one area that he doesn't have to worry about anything is his rushing upside. That's really what we're talking about with Jalen Hurts on that side, and that's what I want to mention. I mean, Jalen Hurts kind of had a down year last year. After when you think about it, in 2022, he averaged almost 25.6 fantasy points per game, and so we saw that last year is at 21 fantasy points per game, and his yardage did slip a little bit. He only had 3,800 yards passing. His yards per attempt went down as well. And his touchdown rate, everything kind of plummeted last year. but rushing value did not, right? So when you think of his rushing value, 605 rushing yards, 15 touchdown runs. Oh man, we love tush push. We love the tush push because he gets it in there. And the thing is, when you're looking at touchdown runs, they accounted for 24% of his fantasy points. They didn't get rid of the tush push. It's still going to be there. I don't care if Saquon Barkley is there or not. When they land on that 1 yard line, they're going to Jalen Hurts there. So he does have that, right? So, and if he boosts his passing efficiency at all, which I think he should, I think that he is going to improve that, then you're really talking about a kid that could finish as QB1 overall, right? Because of that rushing upside. And even though he had a down year last year, when you're looking at the numbers, there was very little games that he fell outside the top 10. So when you're looking over really, he had 3 games last year he fell outside the top 10. That's consistency. And he also had like 7 games in the top 5. So that's where that rushing standpoint comes from. He had 157 attempts, which is what you like to see there. And then when you're looking at just the scouting report, obviously he's going to get better. He's not a perfect passer. He probably will never be a perfect passer. We've been watching this kid since college, but he's more efficient there. I like what they have in that room. AJ Brown and Devonta Smith are 2 top 12 guys in the NFL. They are very, very good. Devonta Smith, there's a reason they just re-upped his contract and he won the Heisman. Obviously, AJ Brown is that top 5 guy. I also think there's going to be upside, and they hadn't done this in the past, but in Kellen Moore's offense, I do think we'll see it more. Passing to Saquon Barkley. I think Barkley can be that target guy, that third target getter on this team. And that's something to note when you're thinking of Barkley's upside from a receiver. We can see that help Jalen Hurts, not hurt him. There's that dump off option, those touchdowns on for the running back. Paris Campbell is there. I don't want to go down that train again. Ainias Smith is also there, Johnny Wilson, those guys. But in Dallas Goedert, right? We know it's there. They have one of the best offensive lines in the country, or in the NFL. So you love that about them as well. And from an outlook standpoint, from a rushing standpoint, I think he's a top 3 guy. And I think he has a safer floor just because of that rushing standpoint. And you have to rely on those passing touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about his season last year, the rushing production was there, but that was despite the injury that kind of kept him in the pocket a little bit more than I think he wanted to be. And I think that made him more uncomfortable. And that's why you can say, well, the rushing or the injury forced him to not run the ball, so he threw the ball into traffic more. But I think it was just he is best when he's able to run and gun. He's a run and gun quarterback, and I think he does have really great accuracy down the field. At times he just couldn't drive the football last year. And so you could see it on the film. I think we're going to get a healthier, a motivated Jalen Hurts this year. The mental makeup side of this, like both of these kids are made up of something special. And I think that while that's not a fantasy football argument, like that will contribute to their success at the NFL level. So I think you're spot on with all of that. When we talk about the debate, though, it's tough because could I see 45 touchdowns from CJ Stroud through the air this year? Potentially. Could I see Jalen Hurts minimizing those interceptions and maybe still putting 15 in and throwing for 30? And we're looking at equal numbers of touchdowns. Yes. But I still lean CJ Stroud, and it's just by a hair. It's interesting because Jalen Hurts, I was making an argument, and I think I can still make an argument that he should have been valued ahead of Patrick Mahomes in Dynasty. And I know that sounds like a big hot take, but when you look at what Patrick Mahomes has done over the last couple of years and the lack of a rushing floor, Jalen Hurts has been the better fantasy football asset. So to me, this comes down to, do I think Stroud's going to take a big, big leap this year? I do. I'm ranking him ahead. I do have Hurts finishing ahead of him this year, though. So it's kind of like you're going to wait one more year, and then I think maybe Stroud takes over. But long-term, give me Stroud.
I just go back to the rushing upside, and we talk about Konami code. We talk about that ability to kind of have that rushing standpoint. And I think that you are right about the injury. I think the reason why we only saw 23 touchdowns last year, and then, when you had those interceptions that he had, I mean, he had some bad interception games. He had 15 interception. He had, 3 interception game, a 2 interception game. Down the stretch when he had those 5 interceptions, a lot of that was because he had to do so much. And you saw that for him, and that's not his game, like you mentioned. But that offense was out of sync. There's a reason why they got Kellen Moore. There's a reason why they brought who they brought in. I think that bounces back, and I could see him have 30 touchdown passes, but still keep that rushing 12 touchdowns, right? And then him and Stroud are going to be close anyway. So it's like, hey, how does that rushing kind of give you over the top? And I still think based on value, though, because I put a poll out there and it was like 70-30. I'd rather have CJ Stroud over Jalen Hurts. Maybe in a dynasty startup, they're 103, 104. But in dynasty leagues, I do think that there's a scenario where you can go out and trade CJ Stroud for Jalen Hurts plus something, like a real asset. Like I think there's a gap enough to where I'm okay getting Jalen Hurts because, like you said, he could finish as higher this year and he could push for quarterback one in fantasy with his rushing upside. But if I'm on the clock and I'm looking at it from a dynasty standpoint there, I'm going to lean Hurts. I'm going to say, hey, I like that rushing upside. I like that win now this year and where I'm comfortable with both these guys. But that rushing upside to me, I really want for the next 3-4 years.
Yeah, my only pushback to all of this, everything that we've mentioned, is the last time Jalen Hurts was at what we would call an elite fantasy performer was with Shane Steichen.
Yeah.
And since, I mean, I know it's only been one season and we're going to see what it looks like this year, but there's a very good chance that it was just Shane Steichen that made Jalen Hurts into that. Like you mentioned, it was Slowick, right?
Yeah.
So we'll definitely see this year. I think this could flip. I think this could consistently flip based on, what happened the previous 4 weeks. So this is one of the better debates, though. I think there's one player that could enter this conversation that now plays for Shane Steichen, but we'll see how his value accrues this year.
I think if that player over in the Colts plays as well as I think he can, we could have very solid top 5 guys in Superflex for the next 3 or 4 years where you're pretty comfortable with grabbing any of those guys. But let us know in the comments. What do you think? You drafting CJ or you drafting Jalen Hurts? Who's wrong and who is right? And who do you think has more value right now? Are there some trades out there that you want us to look at in terms of both of these guys where you would pivot off of? We love helping you out. So drop that in the comments and go check out our Patreon. We appreciate all the support over there. You can find it at patreon.com/thedevilroyale. We have Substack articles. We got all kinds of stuff going on over there for you guys. So appreciate you guys. We'll check you guys in the next video.